Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Folks have been asking for it. It's coming up. The historic Metagame Challenge is a week away, and I wanted to get this video out as early as possible so folks can practice with the decks, get ready. The Metagame Challenge, basically 2,000 gold to get in. It's best of 3 format. This one is the historic format, and you can win upwards of 30 packs of random assortment of older historic packs, most likely. It might be newer packs, but usually with the historic, they give you old packs. So the intent of this video, what we usually do on the channel is like meta breakdowns, best performing decks. I'm going to give you a bunch of different deck ideas that I think all are suitable and could potentially get you to the 7 wins, provided you have some practice with the deck. Historic is a very wide format. There's some pillars in terms of archetypes, but it does reward you very similar to some Eternal formats. The better you are with the deck, the more reps you've had, the stuff like that, it does pay off in that regard there. I'm bringing you 12 decks today. There's going to be a lot more that you can probably find. I think these ones are really good options, both from like a time consumption in terms of how long it takes to play, and then just general like viability in terms of the format. A couple of resources. So we're going to be looking at Untapped.gg, which is a companion tool that runs alongside Arena's client, tracks win rate data for all the users, aggregates it, gives us really good stats. If you want to get started with Untapped, it's in the video description, so you can check that out. We're also going to be looking at some deck lists from MTG Arena Zone. These are kind of a curated list of decks from folks that have placed high on the ladder. For historic decks myself, I kind of go to 4 creators, players, stuff like that as kind of my basis of seeing what's good, what's popular, and they kind of set the meta. So we have Mistman, plays a lot of control combo. We have Orzhov MTG, produces content for MTG Arena Zone, frequently gets #1 mythic, variety of decks. We have Mafi, who's an Italian player. A lot of good ideas there. And then Binary Soulless, someone off Twitter that has a lot of success in the format. So general some ideas, great content from them. Check them out at Twitter or any of the places, Twitch, wherever they are. So we are going to jump in. No particular, I just put the parameters, Platinum to Mythic, to get a big enough sample size. Because the format's so wide, people play so many different decks, it's hard to get aggregated data. So this is why we have to go with this approach. So jumping into it, no particular order again. Rakdos Goblins, 69% win rate. Again, it's a pretty wide range, but this core of the deck is a slightly more aggressive slant. So you have a number of 1-drops. I believe the original deck list came from Ulth. So you have Cacophony, Scamp, 1 mana. Phyrexian Goblin Warrior. When it deals combat damage to a player, you could sacrifice. If you do, Proliferate. And then when it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. There's Lord style effects, so it's ways to give incidental damage. You have the Fuseling that gets bigger whenever another creature or artifact you control is put into the graveyard. So another way to kind of get larger there. You can kind of do a combo in a way, like depending on how your opponent blocks, you could sack this up to Skirk Prospector, getting you mana, some value in that regard. Similarly, like the Cacophony can be used as a combat trick to deal damage. This is also kind of a mana engine to cheat you ahead on mana. You have Battlecry Goblin that makes more goblins and pumps up, gives haste. Munition Expert's like a removal spell. Ruvenalt is a lord that can potentially provide card advantage when your creatures die. While not a goblin, you're going to see this card in a lot of decks. It is arguably the best card in Historic. Crucius lets you tutor, gets you mana value, replaces lands later with spells. It's got a whole bunch of utility in here, but with this deck here, it basically allows you to discard any of your 3-drops and always find Muxus. So that's kind of the engine of the deck. Muxus lets you just kill out of nowhere. You have Chieftain for haste, and then Fable the Mirror Breaker to make copies of your key cards. Your sideboard, you have just some removal, Fatal Push, Feed the Swarm as enchantment, or just creature removal. Snoop for kind of card advantage in the grindier matchups. Chandra, the same thing. Graveyard Hate. And then Ruvenal Trashmaster for the artifact decks in the format. Basically turns all your goblins into destroy target artifact. I'll paste all these deck lists in the video description, forgot to mention that, so you can just copy and paste. I'll put timestamps, everything like that. It's probably going to be a little bit longer video than what we normally do, but I want to cover as many decks as possible. Then we have 4-color control. This is a Mistman deck, 67% win rate. This is likely probably all his games. Plays a lot of historic. There's a lot of one-ofs, but the core of this deck, it is 4-color, but he calls it Grixis Teferi. It's basically Grixis deck using Crucius to filter the mana. You have Mana Confluence for white mana, Glacial Fortress, and then the treasure tokens to cast Teferi. Just a bunch of disruption, counter spells, various types of interaction. I believe he's replaced the Aether Gust with the new counter spell, the red-green counter spell, like the Mana Leak, or the Make Disappear, but scales to counter 6. It pays 6 if it's green or red, so I'd make that switch. Snapcaster Mage, just a bunch of removals, sweepers. Crucius kind of holds the deck together. I'm not going to go like one by one. It's a lot of like incidental. I will say he's very good at control. I would practice this deck if you're interested in control, but it does take a bit of nuance. I've picked up his deck sometimes and I've seen him go like 90% win rates on his stream, and then I've like failed miserably. There's a lot of nuance and decision making here, but just like Graveyard Hate, counters, removal, just kind of a whole bunch of disruptions, Kalitas for like life gain, Tome for the grindy matchups mixed in there. From there we go to 5-color Reanimator. So this was a list, I believe, from the Arena Championship, the last one. It's really a Mardu Reanimator deck. The core of this deck, again, Crucius is the engine, but basically you're trying to throw into your graveyard Atraxa and then reanimate it either with Unburial Rites or with Priest of the Fell Gods. You can do that, like throw Atraxa into the graveyard with either Bloodtithe Harvester or Fable the Mirrorbreaker or Crucius Discard. A bunch of disruption, Inquisition, Thoughtseize, some removal, flexible removal also for hate pieces, and Fragment Reality. You also have a discard outlet in Phyrexian Scrapyard. That lets you discard, conjure lands, and then can convert the lands, if you have 3 of them, into Soul New Phyrexia, which is a 6/6. Giganta Companion. Your sideboard, you just have more removal, hand hate, Pithing Needle for activated abilities, graveyard hate, number of just ways to blow up artifacts, sweepers, and then Serra Emissary. Certain decks just don't have ways to kill Serra Emissary. So like against like creature decks, anything that doesn't have like incidental ways like to burn you out, for example, could just lock your opponent out of the game. We then go to Jund Midrange. So this is Zoomer Jund, as they would call, Boomer Jund being modern Jund. But you still have your Tarmogoyfs in here, kind of the staple of that format. But the 2 cards again, so you have your Cruciuses, but then you also have a Jarsoul in this deck. Jarsoul is a very big engine. Think of like Snapcaster Mage, but you don't have to pay the mana. So every turn you can cast any spell with mana value equal to the intensity. So it starts with 1. So turn 1, you have to cast, say, a Thoughtseize from your graveyard for free. Turn 2, its intensity becomes 2 because you cast a spell. So then you can cast a Tarmogoyf from your yard, a Bloodtithe Harvester, whatever it may be. 3, 4 onwards. You have card advantage in Seasoned Pyromancer, Fable the Mirrorbreaker, Shieldred on the top end, kind of graveyard hate, 7 pieces of discard, and then a bunch of removal scattered in as well. This one's at 66% win rate. Again, in the sideboard, just a whole bunch of flexible options. Removal, Bloodchief's Thirst, Fiery Impulse, Hand Hate, Graveyard Hate. When they are not playing a lot of like sweeper style effects, or if it's like draw go, then you can play Rahilda. It's good because it steals cards from your opponent. It's also very good in like just Expulge all the resource top deck. You can start stealing cards from your opponent. Flexible removal, Graveyard Hate, Sweeper, Hand Hate, and Exile. This is very good against Goblins, Knight of Souls Betrayal. So what you do is basically you take out Shieldred against Goblins, you bring in Knights of Soul Betrayal, so you can always find your hate piece. Similarly, against the Artifact deck, you bring in Shatterstorm instead of Shieldred, and then you just take them out. And then Minsc and Boo is a very powerful Planeswalker in the grindy matchups. We then go to calling it's Boros, Transmogrify, Indomitable Creativity. This is an alt deck as well, but basically it is a Boros tokens deck that's looking to use either Indomitable Creativity or Transmogrify to go into Atraxa and Sarah's Emissary, so you get card advantage, you can lock your opponent out of the game. Your backup plan is just like Wedding Announcement tokens, Fable tokens, Scrub tokens, Legion Landing. You have the Myrex in there, so you have like a fair beatdown game, but then you also have the ability to just like, oops, combo, here's my 7/7, good luck beating me now. You can also target the Mutavault with any of these types of effects. Your sideboard, you have Fragment Reality, just as the removal. You have Paladin class, attacks like counter spells. You have Surge of Salvation for black or red-based removal, Rest in Peace for Graveyard Hate, a Sweeper, and then Rex comes in against heavy counterspell decks or heavy removal decks, where these generally aren't as good. Lots of talking today. So then we go to Bant Hammer time. So this is a deck just a shade under 60%. And this one here is basically kind of 2 decks in one. So one of the big staples of the format is Retrofitter Foundry. This is kind of an engine card. You're mainly using it for its last mode where you can sacrifice a Thopter to make a 4/4. So you have Thopters in the form of Ornithopter that you get the value with that. And then you can also, in just the grindy games, make tokens, stuff like that. You pair that with like the Hammer package. So you have Colossal Hammer, which is usually 8 mana to equip, but gives you 10/10 power. You offset the equipped 8 with either Kemba's Outfitter, which recalibrates the equip cost to 1 mana. Sigarda's Aid, which lets you flash in and equip for free, or with Kemba, which lets you attach an artifact, an equipment, get your types right, Joe, to any of your creatures. You also have Belt of Giant Strength from the Baldur Gate set that is very similar in terms of giving plus 10/10. So you're basically trying to throw an equipment. You have Shadowseer for Lifelink Trample on like any of your creatures. You also have Invisible Stalker that can't be targeted and is unblockable. Reality Chip is also card advantage in the deck. And then you have like tax effects with Esper Sentinel. Sideboard, just Graveyard Hate, Activate Ability Hate, cheap removal, Graveyard Hate, and then like counter spells with Aluris Companion built in. From there, let's head over. So this is Black-White Humans that Alth just got a made to #1 with. So it is a human tribal list. It's playing the new Copper Coat Vanguard. So it gives your humans +1 power. You have Sigardian that can basically, it conjures copies, so it makes copies of itself to your hand, which you can cast, but you have to discard them at the end of turn. So for every 2 mana you have, you get to cast like another copy effectively, and this lets you tap down your opponent's creatures. That gives you an ability to just attack outright into your opponent. Gets rid of blockers. You have Jarina, which when it enters the battlefield, you get Graveyard Hate, and then you can sacrifice Jarina, and humans you get Troll get Indestructible and Hexproof. You also have Juggernaut Peddler, which is basically like almost like a Thoughtseize style effect. It enters the battlefield, you look at your opponent's hand, they exile the card, and then you choose a card, they exile it, and then they get Juggernaut, which is a 5/3 artifact that has to attack each turn. But you basically take their best card out and then give them like a kind of useless artifact for the most part. This is Aluris Companion with the good art. So kind of mixed into that, just lots of cheap, aggressive creatures. Containment Priest for anything trying to like cheat into play, reanimation, exile, stuff like that. Artifact Enchantment Hate, Tax Hate with Thalia, Brave the Elements for protection, and if you're playing against like a monocolor deck, Pseudo Unblockable. Dire Tactics for removal, Portable Hole for removal, and then Soulgine and Tormont's Crypt as Graveyard Hate. We then go to Selesnya Heliod combo. So this one got 7-0 in the March Metagame Challenge. This deck largely hasn't changed. So with Eternal formats, you usually don't see too much deviation on some of the staple decks, but this is an infinite combo. So you have the combination of Heliod, Scurry-Oak, and anything that gains you a life when a creature enters the battlefield. So Johnny's Johnny's Welcome, Prosperous Innkeeper, Luminarch Veteran, or Soul Warden. Basically what happens is creature enters the battlefield, you gain a life, you put a counter on Scurry-Oak. When a counter goes on Scurry-Oak, you create a squirrel. The squirrel then triggers a life gain, and then you rinse and repeat. You gain infinite life, you get infinite squirrels, and you get infinitely large Scurry-Oak, depending on how fast you can click. It is a collected company deck, so you can do that at your opponent's end step, untap, kill them. You also have the backup plan with Voice of the Blessed and Trelasara. Trelasara can scry to help you find key pieces. Voice of the Blessed can become indestructible and get flying, so it's an evasive creature to kind of beat your opponent that way there. Your sideboard, you have a Johnny for card advantage and kind of toxic kill, Peacekeeper for tax, removal and Skyclave, Artifact Enchantment Hate with Fade to History, cheap removal, Rest in Peace for Graveyard Hate, and Rule of Law versus any sort of combo deck, playing more spells, more than one spell per turn type thing, kind of going from there. We then go to Mardu Thopter Greasefang. This one is, I remember when Matthew was playing, just seeing how many combos he could throw on a deck. So basically, it's a Parhelion combo, so that we see like in Explorer, but it's Mardu colors. So you have Parhelion, Sky Sovereign. Goblin Engineer lets you tutor for a specific artifact and put it into your graveyard, generally finding that. You have your Thopter package with Retrofitter Foundry, ways to throw cards into your graveyard, kind of value from your graveyard. Crucius can help you tutor for your Greasefangs. And then you have Nahiri, which lets you draw discard as well as reanimate any of your creatures. You have Yotai that also makes Thopters, that pairs with it, as well as Trash for Treasures, that helps you kind of reanimate any of your kind of threats like that. Tax effects with Esper Sentinel, Artifact Enchantment Planeswalker Hate, Hand Hate, removal, as well as like discard, just flexible removal for Graveyard Hate, Sweepers, Graveyard Hate, and then just like discard anything like that type hate. A lot of the sideboards are just like either destroying hate pieces if you're a combo deck, or kind of hating out your opponent's like effects. We then go to Izzet Creativity. This is 7-0 metagame challenge, so this is another combo deck. So this is similar idea that we saw with some of the other creativity decks. This one's just an Izzet color, so it's an Izzet control deck that's just basically looking to transform any other tokens into Sarah's Emissary to lock out your opponent. You also have Shark Typhoon as a win condition, as well as Hall of the Storm Giants. Counter spells, token makers, card advantage in the deck. Your sideboard, you have like Atraxa when it's a relevant card, and as a Hall for like heavy counter decks. And then you could just transform into Izzet Control, some Graveyard Hate, and then Hand Hate as well. From here, we go to Rakdos Midrange, got number 4 Mythic, and this is kind of just a further elevation of, we have Rakdos being very powerful in Standard, Rakdos being very powerful in Explorer Pioneer. Well, guess what? It's very powerful in Historic as well, based on like Crucius. Seasoned Pyromancer just refills your hand and turns any dead cards late game into tokens. City Stalker, it takes out the highest CMC card in your opponent's hand. Fable the Mirror Breaker, just a bunch of flexible removal, Hand Hate kind of all mixed into there. And then just like creature lands, when both people are in top deck mode, you kind of beat them up that way. You have Lily for like the control matchups, Sorin for the grindy matchups. Sheoldred's Assimilator, 2 mana, 3/1 menace. Enters the battlefield or attacks, exile up to 1 card from graveyard. If a card is exiled this way, you may conjure a duplicate of it in the top 5 cards of your library at random. So steal their best thing out of the graveyard or a combo piece, take advantage of it. Seems pretty good. Artifact, just flexible modular spell, more discard when it's relevant, discard and exile. Sweepers, and then Invasion of Innistrad just as a big kill spell that can also be used as Graveyard Hate when it flips. You get to make zombies and exile stuff. Then we go to the last deck. This one got number 1 Mythic November, but this deck's largely hasn't changed until recently, and I'll show you what I've been testing out in the shell. But there's basically a blue-white version of this deck with the blue-white alchemy Metalink something that draws cards when your artifacts deal damage. I think the Boros version is a lot more explosive, and I like it better. But this one's all in kind of Retrofitter Foundry, so you have Yotai that makes Thopters, you have Barbspike that makes Thopters, you have Ornithopter. Lurrus can buy back Thopters every turn for 0 mana that you then make 4/4s. Ingenious Smith helps you find the combo. Toolcraft is a 1 mana 3/2 first striker in combat. Mashiko gives a huge bonus in terms of power to your creatures. Shadowsphere for trample, lifelink, and then removal and tax. You have your Hushbringers for enter the battlefield style effects. You have Mana Tithe, Pithing Needle for Graveyard Hate, Glass Casket for removal, card advantage kind of mixed in. The version I was playing, and I have a video up of this on my YouTube, just played it yesterday, so I was trying out a couple cards. But there was a new printing, so Pia Nalar Console Revival. This, whenever you play a land from exile or cast spells from exile, you get to create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature. So this provides both hasty Thopters that you can then sack, so it's a recursive way to make tokens that feed the Foundry. I was using 8 draw 2 style effects, so Reckless Impulse as well as Ren's Resolve. There's also Mishra's Workshop or Work Desk, whatever. It's the 1-mana artifact that you could unearth for 2 mana and then you get to play a card. I'm going to try that one out as well because it's an artifact that plays into the shell. I was trying out Reckless Fireweaver, but it kind of sucked. I would just play the Ingenious Smith instead. Where are you? I would play this instead just for card advantage. But this deck really helped me grind in like the heavy removal matchups, just because you have so many ways to replace your cards. Springleaf Drum also really helps accelerate the deck. While it's not as like super aggro, I found it to be a pretty effective way to make like a lot of Thopter style effects. The one card that impressed me the most out of the sideboard was Invasion of Gobekhan. I was playing against, the first match was the like 5-color Niv Mizzet domain style shells, which is basically like how many different ways of removal or stuff like that. Just taxing your opponent. I made a way to give Indestructible to like protect against a sweeper. So there's a lot of utility with stuff like this. Because you don't have Thoughtseize style effects, this is a way to kind of eat at your opponent's hand. The deck's very susceptible to either Divine Purge, Brotherhood's End, or to Farewell. So this gives you a way to kind of attack their hand while still being proactive in terms of the games themselves. So if you want to see a video of that, we played 2 matches with it, but they went pretty long. But I think that it did a good job of showcasing some of the style, like the effects, and really highlight like what Pia can do in this shell here. I have videos of like I have videos of most of these decks, but I have videos of this deck too in action, but I wanted to try out Pia. I think it's a really interesting design space, and it kind of fits the theme really well. So that is it. What I always do with these is, as more decks come up through the weekend, I will link them in the video description to give you some more ideas. Let me know what you've been playing, what you have success with, and if you haven't done so, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're trying to hit 10,000, so greatly appreciate it if you can. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you have a great one, and stay safe out there.